my guests seated in the studio and getting one who is getting ready to join us shortly. And here in the studio, Abdul Malik Okubako, he's editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Also here in the studio, joining us the second time in a very short while for a special, diagnosis, some clinical, diagnosis that ought to be done to a particular subject matter. But of course, he's got good views on a wide-ranging of matters. Ben Efsing, he's the managing editor of the Daily Dispatch newspaper. Here in the studio also is the recently enthroned new national organizer of the New Patriotic Party. He used to be the national youth organizer of the NPP, and he's a man at the core and apex of the ruling party's organizational structure. And he's the board chair of the Youth Employment Agency, YEA. Now just joining us, that's Sami Oku, and now just joining us is Roxon Nelson Dafamapo. He's MP South Dai and member Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committees and Judicial Committees of Parliament. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning.
Right.
Sam.
Okay, so Sami does this once in a blue moon, and good to have you once again.
Good to see you.
Right. Okay,
I enjoy watching at home.
He's been on a campaign people have been shocked and surprised at because it's a stance that not too many of the people, even within his party, like to take, and he's taking that path. Let's check out how much support does he have in seeking to ask the police to go after, the quote-unquote vigilante. I say I don't want to call them vigilante, they are hooligans. Vigilante is a different ball game altogether. When we get there, I shall try to point out to you. Now, we will begin with the very first subject matter, and it has to do with the fact that, and we want to try and see how brief we can be about that. Last week, the intention was to be very brief about it. It was a preliminary matter. Unfortunately, however, Mr. Bako had a lot to say, and the stuff he had to say left many people, surprised, and myself, I was disarmed. Anytime he made an interjection, I couldn't stop him because the things he said, I had my doubts if I'll get to hear them anywhere again. So let's try again and see if we can be brief about it. There is a documentary that's been done, you're aware, and it's been airing on the JoyNews channel on Multi TV. It's been done by Raymond Aqua. And Raymond Aqua has spent some 2 years trying to speak to people and getting people to open up and to speak about the murder of judges and a retired military officer. One of the darkest spots of this country's history. And after that, there's been a lot of issues. And just last week, or this week, former President Jerry John Rawlings had to speak about it. He had indicated that he was going to release a bombshell about the documentary in Kumasi. Apparently, he couldn't wait, and sometime this week, he had a few things to say, more particularly that he believes that what is being done is with a sinister motive, and that this story is being retold to incriminate otherwise innocent people. And he has some example to give. The Yanas murder and his other people, almost 40 people killed. He says, why are we not talking about that? They didn't get justice, but 3 people, were killed. And there's some justice that has been served because people were imprisoned. Why are we talking about that? All right, so let's try and understand. Ben.
Yes.
How do you feel about what the President Rawlings, feel about all of this documentary?
I just have 2 statements.
2 statements?
Yes.
Okay.
One, If somebody goes to steal a piece of yam, the person is arrested and tried. I believe the person cannot say in the courtroom that, please, I stole only a piece of yam. Kweku Baku and Benefson are stealing cars. Why are they free? 2, you mentioned 34 women. I don't think that there were any trials. If there were trials, these were murders which most of them had been unsolved. You talked about the Yana. I believe people were tried in the Yana issue. And the last take, Samson, if he's talking about, for example, the reason why, I believe that many of us still learn about the slave trade, why it happened. And the sustained interest is because if you look at the 2010 census, about 80%, the oldest was at most 9 years old when this happened. So why not? I'm finished.
There are many who have said that, I mean, revisiting this history is not the best for the country because it's a dark part of this country that we have put behind us. So why revisit it? You don't believe that they have a point in that?
They don't.
We should move on?
You see, I don't think that anybody who's lived through a military regime anywhere in Africa will say it's the best. What people may not know, Samson, any time a government wins power, either retains power or an incumbent loses to the opposition, 95% of polling stations in all the security agencies in this country, that party wins. It tells you that the era of people acknowledging that coups, military men in power can be better options to civilian government is past. The rank and file who have gone to peacekeeping, Liberia and so on, they've seen that blind allegiance to an individual, a group of people, brings people down. So once we have good electoral mechanisms, even though there may be imperfections. So yes, people need to realize that these things happen on the military watch. Rawlings may be 100 and he will go. Not that he's the master of coups. But henceforth, people who've never heard about it will see that any time, even if you're a military man, and somebody tries to think that, look, let's change the government with the barrel of the gun so that we can do better, this will stop them. And I repeat, 80%, the oldest was 9 years old. If those who think that we shouldn't have done it, they have other things which have happened that 80% of people need to know, I'm sure if they approach media houses like multimedia, they will be on board.
Interesting. Now, Roxanne, I don't know. I want to check how you also feel, if your sentiments are with the former president and, you know, what should be done. He says, and I read his tweets, he says, a whole documentary on the killing of the major and the judges. An unfortunate tragedy that saw hard, swift justice down to the perpetrators. Unlike the organized assault and killings of the Yana and his 39 elders, for which those perpetrators are yet to see justice. That is the fundamental difference. One group of 4 saw justice. The other group of close to 40 did not and has not. We have rehashed and recooked history to make innocent people look murderous. And in the next breath, using the same name to endorse yourselves, because Rawlings has said he is cultured, in bracket, compared to his predecessors. This is vicious and callous political opportunism. We cannot reduce the harm and pain caused families and the whole country by turning this matter into a political media circus. In the meantime, our party has lost a few too many thinkers and strategists to see things clearly. We fall for traps set easily rather than a focused fight to ward off this attempt to twist and manipulate the truth, in bracket, which thankfully some started well, bracket close. We are instead back to hang Rawlings because of the DG publication. And this is by Jerry John Rawlings.
Now, Sam, let me use the opportunity to say good morning to my constituents, customarily, people in Peki, Pali, Pervetongo. I find favor with the position of JJ initially. But reading his statement deeply or over and over again, I realized that he was even, aside from criticizing the timing and the preparation or the production of the documentary, he was seeking to question the ability of the party hierarchy, because he said my party member. So obviously he speaks of the NDC. He's questioning.
Says our party has lost a few too many thinkers and strategists.
Exactly.
To see this clearly, we fall for traps easily set.
Exactly. And I am worried because I have not heard any party stalwarts, for want of a better word, say anything that, or say things that do not dovetail into his sentiments. So this worries me. As a practicing lawyer and as a friend of the courts, and as people who work in tandem with the judiciary closely, and as a member of the judiciary committee, I will not sit here and glorify. Indeed, I will never glorify this crime ever. But the point I want to make is that the timing of the documentary and the fact that there's no indication that other crimes of equal measure or of equal importance will be touched upon. Indeed, there are a lot of unresolved crimes that we have in the country. So his sentiments is that indeed, if you want to do this documentary, do it in such a way that the truer facts will emerge. But he's of the opinion that having watched the documentary, a lot of the accounts, as dramatized in it, have been skewed, particularly so to damage his image or his record. Why is he saying so? He says that this was a crime that happened about 36 years ago. And as soon as it happened, investigations were conducted swiftly. The perpetrators paid for it with the highest price available. They were put to the gallows. But he's of the opinion that over time, there's been an attempt to indicate that indeed it's not all the perpetrators that have been nailed in the matter. And so there's been an attempt to stretch it so much so that it touches on him. And he thinks that it's not fair. You and I have done some criminal practice. Indeed, I think the greater part of my work has been criminal practice. There's no time bar to investigating a crime. Even if persons have been tried, convicted, and sentenced appropriately, if indeed the evidence, the available evidence suggests that there are other conspirators, there are other persons who participated or conspired to ensure that the crime took place, they could be held before the law court. All right.
People who enjoy the indemnity clauses in the Constitution can also be held before the law court.
Why? Has any evidence emerged to say that persons who are...
It's only a question I'm asking,
yes.
Because if you're looking at the class of people who you may say this is being done to, as it were, incriminate them.
You haven't laid the foundation for your question. You haven't laid the foundation for your question.
The question I'm asking is, will those people, you know, be people who there is a window to take them through a criminal process, as you suggest, because there's no time bar to, you know, crime? How about those who enjoy a constitutional protection of what has happened in the past?
You see, we have gotten to a jurisprudential dispensation where certain aspects of the Constitution, when I was reading government as a young person in 1995 in Maori school, thought that it could never be shut down. 20 years down the line, they are being shut down. Do you understand my point? So, to say that because of the indemnity clause, if there is evidence that suggests that persons' names have emerged to be persons who conspired, who participated, who, or in other ways, had something to do with this crime, and therefore need to be brought before the law, they cannot be brought. That can be tested. So I want us to be careful. But I made the point that you didn't lay a foundation for a question, because you see, you asked the question presuming that the new evidence that may emerge and the persons that it may touch on or it may touch against are persons that are covered by the effect of the indemnity clause as they exist.
There's a man complaining.
Yes.
And you are speaking and sharing sympathy with the man complaining.
He's complaining as the head of state.
And then you point out to the fact.
No.
You point out to the fact that there is no statute limitation to a prosecution of a crime.
Exactly.
Then I ask the question.
Yes.
The one complaining,
yes,
if it were the case that matters affect him,
yes,
is there even a possibility of reopening a case against him to prosecute him?
I am making the argument that the man is complaining as the head of state at the time. Not to suggest that he actually participated in the crime. Because you see, anything that happens, whatever things are happening now, we are not mentioning the names of government appointees, we are mentioning the name of the president.
This may be a different case.
No, it's not a different case. I place my submissions in context.
Okay.
The man is complaining as the head of state at the time. And he says that as the head of state, I took express action so swift that within days and weeks, the matter had been dealt with. People paid with it with the highest price ever available in law.
All right.
You know, with their lives. And so if today there are attempts to suggest that perhaps the crime was not properly investigated, or when the investigations were conducted, certain persons that ought to have been roped in and investigated and probably convicted and sentenced accordingly were left off the hook, then it is not fair on him. That is what he's saying. He says that given the circumstances, he did his utmost best and brought the perpetrators that the evidence suggests clearly that they were involved to book. That is his position. So he says that multimedia should also be interested in unresolved crimes. What you brought up
that led to the question.
Yes.
Let me read a portion of the transitional provision again to you, why I asked the question.
I know, he's there.
No member of the Provisional National Defense Council, Provisional National Defense Council Secretary, or other appointees of the Provisional National Defense Council shall be held liable either jointly or severally for any act or omission during the administration of the Provisional National Defense Council. It is not lawful for any court or tribunal to entertain any action or take any decision or make any order or grant any remedy or relief in any proceedings instituted against the government of Ghana or any person acting under the authority of the government of Ghana, whether before or after the coming into force of this constitution, or against any person or persons acting in concert or individually to assist or bring about the change in government which took place on the 24th day of February 1966, blah, 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 and the others, as have been mentioned.
Exactly.
So that's all I was pointing to.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm happy you have...
So if there is a suggestion, what is being done is to bring up something that will lead to some people being held in a court of law, as you suggest.
Let me respond.
I'm saying anybody who will be associated will be within that government. It is not only the president, as you suggested earlier, but an appointee under the government. And this is your constitution.
Exactly.
You are telling me today that the Attorney General of Ghana can get up and go to court and do this?
Let me address the question. You have read the transitional, the indemnity clause. It says that acts of government, it didn't say crime. Acts of government. It didn't say crime. We speak of crime. And I am saying that this was not sanctioned by the state. So even the applicability of the indemnity clause does not come in. We speak of crime. This is not an act that was endorsed by the state. And you and I, we have very good understanding of the law. So I want the submission to be clearly understood that the transitional provisions and indemnity clause as captured in there speaks of acts endorsed by the state. This is a crime, not endorsed by the state. That is why, indeed, the state prosecuted the offenders.
Okay. I'll not belabor it because you're leaving out a big chunk of that provision. Yes, Kweku. Yes, Kweku. So
no,
what do you make of
the whole trust
what do you
of the
make of
provision
President Rawlings'
says that
complaint?
acts endorsed by the state.
No, you have left out so much even before you get to that.
No. Sam.
Yes, Kweku.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Rawlings is a Ghanaian citizen. He's entitled to, react to anything that he finds adverse to his interest. So I'm not about to take away his democratic right to have spoken to the documentary and the kind of things he said. I thought I had an impression that this documentary is only one out of many that your station or Raymond are embarking
Yes, he's on an enterprise to do what's
unresolved
crimes that shook
the nation. Yes. So,
and this is one of them.
Yes, so it's only that they use their discretion to begin with this. And I think I like the idea they began with this. Yeah, that's a more dramatic, explosive thing. If you want to capture people's attention and keep on the trail, why not? You can start with this. But I'm sure others will come. Mr. Rawlings has alluded to some. So we hope when they come, I would want to know what Mr. Rawlings' reaction would be. But having said that, I would have wished if he had kept quiet. If I were his advisor, I would have told him that, sir, silence is golden relative to this particular incident, this documentary. Where was Mr. Rawlings when the NRC pronounced its verdict? Look, the NRC was not a documentary. It was something that was conducted under an act of parliament. Of course, it took into consideration all this indemnity, immunity, all those things, so it took away criminal jurisdiction from the NRC agenda and left it on a truth-telling, reconciliation type of fact-finding, all those things meant to, heal our souls, as it were. And I'm sorry I do this, but this is a public document. It's a public record. So I'm not sure anybody can tell me I'm accusing anybody. And indeed, it's not my view. I'm quoting.
Okay.
This is from page 139 of the Volume 1 Executive Summary of the NRC report, which is dated 12 October 2004. It says, the SIB found Captain Chikata to be a co-conspirator in the abduction and cold-blooded murder of the judges and the retired army officer. But like Amatekwe, Captain Chikata could not by himself have carried out the deed because he was not even a member of the PNDC. It needed the authority of someone higher up, and that person was Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, who, according to evidence before the commission, had months before he succeeded in overthrowing the Liman administration, threatened to punish the judges who had freed so-called AFIC convicts. Without his express orders or tacit approval, the operational pass would not have been issued to America and his gang. It was the public reaction to the abduction that led to the cabal to beat a retreat and try to undo what had already been done. The search for a scapegoat began, and the misguided Amatekwe was found to fill the role. like the man who rode on the back of a tiger. He did not know how to get off and ended up in its mouth. This is SIB. Look, a serious verdict by a commission of that nature. You were former president, chairman of the PNDC, all those things. What was his reaction to such an explosive verdict? He's worried about a documentary by a journalist or a radio station. That's what he's worried about. So he begins to make noise all over the place when this document stays forever and ever.
This is straightforward and emphatic.
Very, very.
In its judgment.
Thank you.
The documentary doesn't. It just
Thank
tells
you.
the story.
Fantastic
Hands the
point.
microphone to the actors to talk.
Thank you for that fine line of extension that you've just drawn. So I expected that this one rather would have elicited a more serious reaction from him, not the noise, hey, that. No, very serious, focused. Why did he let this go? Apart from the noises that he made. In terms of the real value. How many years down the line? 2004. We are 2018, 14 years down the line. You are now coming to talk of fundamental distinction between justice for 4 people and injustice for 40 people. That's not a resolution. For you who was chairman of that regime then and became president subsequently, you see, he missed a great opportunity. People have forgotten. He appeared before the NRC. He actually 13 times was invited to come and respond to allegations and things people had made about him. And there was a procedure to follow. They bring you what the people are saying, you fill in a certain statement, then you also make your statement, all goes to the commission, they cite order, because they may have to call orders, and then you come. 13 times he declined or he refused or he failed. He rather was arguing with them left, right, center. So eventually the NRC had to issue summons. How do you call it? You said subpoena to him. Subpoena that required that he should produce 2 records. 2. One Damatekwe tape, which is part of what we just read. The second one was the audio, the video clip, Air Force Station. Last week I couldn't immediately remember. It was I wasn't the only person, but I was part of those who had made that case. Okay, the extrajudicial execution of Jiwa, Sakwadie, and the rest. Sakwadiado, the soldier, the former AFIC member, who were shot right there at the Air Force Station after they themselves had decided that all these people are guilty. Shoot them. And they shot them. And there's a video. He was asked to produce these 2 because he was so uncooperative, unlike Captain Chikata, who went through according to the procedures, did a statement and appeared and did his case. Mr. Rawlings apparently did not have the requisite capacity to appear before an organized platform and to deal with issues face to face. He didn't have the capacity. If it was a rally or a marketplace or a chop bar, he would have made himself immediately available. Come and stand there and do his Western cowboyism things.
Okay.
No, please, hold on.
In his view, justice was done.
Justice was done. America was sentenced to death in absentia. Mr. Rawlings was chairman, became president. I never heard him asking Interpol to look for America. After last week's program, I got a hint where America is. From a very reliable source. He's alive and he's doing very well in a North American country. Mr. Rawlings is talking of Yana. Yana, the government set up a commission. I'm taking him on his own life. Wako Commission, isn't it?
That's right.
They came out with some findings.
That's so.
The Attorney General decided to act on the findings. They went to court. The 2 suspects or accused persons were discharged and acquitted. Is that so?
That's correct.
The NDC in opposition were opposed to that exercise, as well as the composition of the commission. And they promised in their manifesto.
We were not opposed to the exercise. We were opposed to the composition.
Okay, thank you. Just note.
I will grant him that. No, I'll grant him that. Okay. We cannot always get everything 100%. I'll grant him that. Okay. The composition, they said there was an educationalist, and murder had nothing to do with educationalist. There was a linguist. and that murder had nothing to do with the inquest. Some frivolous, childish, I'm sorry, let me put it away, infantile explanations.
In courts, when the courts are trying murder, they try it with a jury.
Thank you.
The jury is not composed of some experts.
La,
It's composed
you
of
see,
ordinary people of society.
You see dedication? That is why I said it was infantile.
You cannot import the same. You cannot import the same.
They said it's what inquest, and that what has criminal investigations or murder investigations got to do with linguistics. They said so. Meanwhile, the chairman of the commission was a judge, a retired jurist, but they did that. So they promised to set up a second presidential commission. If you recall, when they came into office, they revised that and said, let's go for criminal investigations. So they took 14 people to court.
Yes.
What happened in court? They were also discharged and acquitted. Mr. Rawlings then came and said he had a video clip that showed those who did the killings jumping over the wall. He said it's in Holland. Where is that clip? It could have helped for us to resolve this mystery. Because there are aspects of the Diana thing that is unresolved. I agree. So if he's making that case, fine. No, finish. Serial murders. You remember? He was in charge when the serial murders occurred. The last one was 2001. He was no longer in office. But he had information to the effect, according to him, that 14 senior cabinet ministers were implicated. The police CID, then led by director of CID, incidentally Apietu, went to his house. Have you forgotten?
No, I haven't.
And gave him the opportunity to give them the evidence. He called for chemical interrogation.
Yeah.
That's what they did. Rocco Frimpong, they said it was contract killing. The good old Professor Mills started it. Rawlings championed it. And that if they came to office, they would investigate and prosecute because it was government people who did it. At that time, the police had already arrested some suspects who were on trial. When they came into office, they indeed arrested 4 soldiers of the 64 Infantry Regiment, kept them in custody for over 485 days against the Constitution. They came to court with their docket, Betty Mould Idrusu, then AG. A docket that said that crime was committed by government officials who recruited a senior military officer to get these boys to do so because of some problems with redenomination exercise. You heard it? Meanwhile, at that time, there were 4 suspects in police custody who were also undergoing a trial for the same offense. What happened? So if Mr. Rawlings talks about all these things, he should look at himself in the mirror and ask himself that what has been his contribution in resolving these ones. Some of them, he was in office. He had opportunity to do.
Okay.
Some, he wasn't in office, but they said he had something of evidential value to provide.
Okay.
Nil.
All right, Kuku. Thank you.
I pray, Mr. Rawlings.
Right. Yes. So
exercise silence.
Now, Sammy, you see, things happening in this country, and like we have come to observe, it is easy to give them a political color and to avoid responsibility for them. The best way to do is to find political color for them, and then you get out.
Sorry?
The President Rawlings says, what has happened is a vicious, callous political opportunism. In fact, you'd find persons, you know, with the affiliated or connected, you know, to the tradition of the NDC, suggest that somebody must have paid, or this was set up by the government. I don't know how that this, you know, multimedia would be bought to do such a thing. What do you say? He said, we cannot reduce the harm and pain caused families and the whole country by turning this matter into a political media circus.
Good morning, Samson, and a very good morning to your cherished viewers and listeners across the world. First of all, I want to proceed on this tangent that crime has no color and crime has no expiry date. as a matter of fact, this dastardly act remains a dark spot in our nation's political history, and also more or less a scar, on all of us, our conscience. The circumstances that led to the murder of these judges and a retired military officer. That notwithstanding, Mr. Rawlings also has every right to speak up, especially when he also does feel that there could also be a deliberate attempt, right or wrong, to also draw him into it frontally. And so I absolutely respect that space. But something I also find a bit intriguing myself, just as Kweku did say, that I didn't know that it was in phases, so you decided to start with this one. And it's quite a crime that shocked the country. I would disagree that in the case of the Yana murder trial, nothing was done. And for us, in fact, even the conclusion of that case happened under the NDC when Professor Mills was president. That was what led to rampaging youth in Tamale. They are Luther boys, Azoka boys, to the extent that they even then said the president should not step foot in Tamale, you remember. Seriously speaking, these two situations are not the same. In the case of the Yana murder trial, in fact, if you read the pathologist's reports, they found it very difficult to even get incriminating evidence because they said it was more of a war zone. I honestly didn't want to go much into these issues because it touches on sensitivities and borders on emotions that families of these murdered High Court judges and that of a soldier. For us in the MPP, we believed and subscribed to what Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, that before the book can be closed, it must be open for all of us to interrogate whatever is in it. And that's why we set up the National Reconciliation Commission. And it's sad that maybe old wounds are being reopened. And this time around, multimedia is opening or reopening some of these old wounds. And also representing the party's headquarters in this particular matter, I believe that it's a sad act, an act that we believe that will still remain a scar and a blot on our political history and the fabric of it. But I think it's time for us to also move on beyond this one, because the National Reconciliation Commission also afforded all parties the opportunity. Some went there, wept bitterly about what has happened in the past. And a time comes when sacrifices must be borne in the supreme interest of our country. So on this particular matter, and without going too much into it, I think that with the setting up of the NRC, it was also clear that we were taking steps to also heal wounds. And so reopening some of these wounds, especially with this matter, is a bit difficult for some of us.
Listen to what one lady says by way of contribution to this discussion. I don't have an idea how associated she is to what happened. She says she thinks that the NRC did a great job, but modeled along the South African post-apartheid reconciliation, left a bit of a vacuum. They could have allowed perpetrators and victims or family of victims appear together. The former pour the pain and bitterness, and the latter apologize, but that wasn't done. Then she says, I think that that vacuum which has been left, families are still bitter, so maybe JJ should take the opportunity now to apologize, and let's all of us move on.
Well, I'm a bit unclear as to...
Were there no instances where
there were
perpetrators and victims met?
both parties met at the commission. And, sometimes it was a bit heated.
Her ultimate is
I don't think it was
an
in
apology
respect of this matter.
But others.
Other cases.
Yeah,
right.
And I think to a larger extent, our National Reconciliation Commission did achieve its objectives and the task given to it. Especially, they also had a counseling unit as part of the commission's job. And they did a fantastic job with that.
Okay.
Kweku is also right that instead of also Mr. Rawlings concentrating much on this documentary, he must also look at the Reconciliation Committee's report that Kweku also just quoted, Because then it looks like Joy FM or Multimedia only decided to also set the stage, get people to be interviewed. But when you have, for the records, a document that people can always quote vividly, if Mr. Rawlings is also having difficulties with that, I think it's also within his rights also challenge.
The documentary refers to portions of these documents.
Yes.
He was given an opportunity to speak if he wanted.
Okay.
He wasn't interested.
Okay.
So almost all parties who are still alive and could be contacted to give their view, I understand were contacted. Those you have on the documentary are those who agreed and were willing to speak, and they spoke, including Chacho Chikata and the rest of them. Yeah.
Yeah, rightly so. And then lastly, we have the strongest opinion that it is time for us to move on. And the NPP has absolutely no interest in supporting or backing multimedia to embark on some of these things. It's within your rights as a media house.
Okay.
For us, our position now is that the National Reconciliation Commission, that when we're in government, we established, did see to it that people were able to offer the platform for them to engage even the accusers. And for us, I think it's time for us to move on.
All right.
Brief comment.
Okay, but quickly. For those within the NDC, especially those who seem to support President Rawlings, they say if multimedia does not do a similar, documentary on the Yana and the 40 others killing, if it doesn't do a documentary on Issa Mobila and how he also was killed, if he doesn't do a documentary on Adams Mahama and Major Mahama, we haven't done anything. So that's even one of them sending a message to me and telling us if we don't do this, then it will show that we have a bias.
But even there are people within there are people who support Mr. Rawlings and of the firm belief that this is also an internally motivated thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not a case of they accusing the MPP. They also.
What do you mean by that? Internally motivated? How?
No, I made that point.
Yeah,
Mr.
Rawlings has also been very critical of his party executives and that of the candidature of some of the aspirants coming out.
Okay.
And so they also feel that they want to keep him busy by responding to these things and to divert attention. Okay. So it cannot be that you're only looking outside. It can also be within.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's good.
Just brief
Politicians will always find a way to own something that someone else is doing, as far as it works for them.
Once you don't patent it.
Okay.
I'm reluctant in saying this, but I think I need to put it in perspective for people to understand. In the 80s, I was a BBC correspondent here and then working for West Africa Magazine. And when this thing happened, I tried some investigations. Along the line, I had to truncate it. But what I found when I started was there was an original scenario and a scenario which changed. Part of the original scenario was what part of the SIB report. What I found out was that it was the 3 judges were supposed to be shown proof of alleged inducements to free people who had been convicted under the FRC and to advise them to stop, otherwise they will be exposed. I think that the agenda to go further than kind of quote blackmailing them or cautioning them, when it got to the time of maybe they decided to do with them. Majaka was not a lawyer, he wasn't a judge. Majaka, I found out, was brought in, or the reason why Majaka was brought in was that, if you remember, Amatokwe led Gihok workers to storm Parliament House during their tea break to attack the parliamentarians and so on. And Major Akwa sacked Amatokwe and those Gihok workers.
Well, more precisely, the Gihok management dismissed them.
Gihok
Akwa was director of personnel.
He was the director of, yes, thanks Kweku. He was the director of personnel at Gihok. So at that time, I found out that was because when I found out this, you hear a lot of stories. You find out that, okay, these 3 have been doing this. The essence was to tell them, look, stop. We know they've done this. So then trying to find out why Majaka was added, you could see that Mijakwa's addition was the late Amatekwe's alleged inclusion. And I believe that, and this will put in a bit perspective as to who
and Cecilia was the judge that dismissed the Gihok workers case.
Right.
Okay.
The Gihok workers were represented by Chachuchukata. Okay. This doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is what I found at that time. So when people say, yes, it may have political leanings, but here's somebody, one person deciding that this man, because those who were sacked kept coming to Amatekwe for their livelihood, you led this and so on. So if you look at it, even though it's past, you can see that here is somebody, one person decides that we are going to do this, we've changed the agenda, have a grudge with this man, let me deal with him. And secondly, for Joy FM, it will be important for also let the public know, if it's 2 years ago, this documentary was started, what time did they decide to do the series? Because the time factor is important. What time did they start that they decided that they would do documentaries on unsolved murders or unsolved cases? That's my take further.
You think the journalist or a media house has an obligation to answer to a politician because they have a suspicion that you are doing something and it doesn't fit their cause?
Not to answer to a politician. It's a saying that if a ghost wants to shake your hand, remove your hand. As I'm a media person, politicians will always find a reason to accuse
they do
somebody.
to every issue.
Every issue.
So why should the journalist on this occasion explain to one part of the political divide
even before Rawlings
that
came
has
in,
a feeling that you may be doing this because somebody is sponsoring you, or you may be doing it because you don't like me?
when Akable came to interview me on this thing,
he
raised a number of issues that why now? I'm saying why now? Because of the demographics which I've said, and secondly, we still watch slave trade.
Okay.
People, they have slave trade in curriculum of institutions. Why it happened? So when he said it started 2 years ago, I was saying that maybe, and I said, look, let's have the framework. Because they're going to get people trying to find reasons. And not that they are obliged to.
Okay.
To put to shame the reason that what would they benefit
All right.
to put somebody or embarrass somebody.
Okay, thank you. Yes, what's the last thing you want to say? Yeah.
There's a doctrine in law, and it's to this effect that irreparability as irreversibility. There are certain harms that are irreversible when they occur. For instance, the killing of a person, we can never reverse the effect. You know, so in law, attempts are made to remedy, to assuage that pain, that irreversible pain. It may never match up to the damage that you suffered. And so the point I want to make is that as a country, I think we got to a stage where
in Ghana, the principle is an eye for an eye, so end of story.
No.
If you commit murder, you suffer murder.
No, this is a very serious
You suffer
problem.
death, or you go to life forever.
Sam, don't trivialize this
Go ahead.
matter.
I'm not trivializing
So
I'm telling you what it is.
We use the National Reconciliation Commission to, as it were, close this chapter in a manner that will bring catharsis to both the persons who suffered the pain for their lost ones and the persons who also suffered the pain because their families were convicted for the said crime. But I see an attempt to suggest that aside from all this, there's still a suspicion that the persons who actually perpetrated the crime have not been found.
But let's be sure about something, though.
Yes.
You say the aim of the commission was to, as it were, get,
Closure.
for purgation,
Yes.
for those families who suffered it,
Yes.
and also the other side,
Yes.
those whose relatives
Yes.
were incarcerated for it.
Not incarcerated. They were executed.
Who were executed for
Yes.
it. I don't think that was part of it.
You see,
those who were killed for killing,
yes,
the NRC was not set up for them.
yes, not. It didn't target those people.
Okay.
But you see that You see, when a family of yours is picked up for having committed a crime,
we don't owe you an apology for that. So
I'm not saying
they
you
were
do,
not part of the
but the
NRC's
family
agenda.
suffers a certain pain if indeed you are convicted, especially when the suggestion is strongly held that he may not have committed a crime, as we are seeking to do now.
Okay.
You know, so the point is that multimedia owes it to us.
To you, as in
to all of us.
Those of you who share the view of Rawlings.
No, to the generality of the people. That what they are doing.
The generality of the people is not complaining.
Oh, why? I am one of them. So, yes. So I belong to the generality of the people.
All right.
That they are not doing this as a result of any ill motive.
Okay.
They are doing this for the just cause of the matter.
Okay.
But the suspicion is strongly that the timing is such that we think it is.
All right, thank you. Kuku has a small point to make, and then we'll move on. But obviously, Raymond Akwa, I mean, you and your team, this is what you are going to do, because you are doing series of these, and you will have to be explaining to each of the parties as and when, you know, where the balance, you know, tilts. You have to explain to each of them to their satisfaction why you are doing a particular story.
Explain to the public.
Okay.
My focus is on the message,
the
content,
all right,
not the messenger and the vehicle.
Okay.
Not. Is there anything in the documentary that really wasn't factual? Let people who want to contest come forward. That's a good interrogation to do.
Okay.
Okay. But can you imagine if Mr. Rawlings had cooperated with the NRC relative to the procedures and processes that had been put in place, and had appeared himself and shown, you know, giving answers, all that, and eventually said, look, whatever it is, I sincerely apologize, show some remorse, all that. Can you imagine the effect that would have had then and even now?
It appears that was the ultimate opportunity.
Think about that.
Yes. You said 30 seconds. Do it. Let's move on.
I'm surprised why you find it weird that the general public too should be able to know the motive and know the time.
It's not the general public.
No, as Ben was saying, we're part of the general public. Because you are airing a documentary, we are watching it, we are listening to it. And we should be able to have a feedback.
And you have a number to do, and each one you have to explain.
And honestly, for me,
in fact, when you do almost every story in this country, there's a political, explanation by the politicians.
If we are answerable to the public, the media being the fourth estate of the realm must also be answerable to us as a people. And honestly, many of the people I have spoken to, they thought that this was an internal operation, more of an internally motivated one. So I'm surprised that you said, you know,
from within the NDC.
Yes,
are you kidding me?
What did you understand when he said it earlier?
I made a point.
Was to keep Rawlings busy. You know, now that you are in the heat of your flag bash, you know, that's what I thought.
If you recall, I made the point that when I read JJR's statement.
But initially you didn't get what I said.
No, I did.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying.
So I'm saying that when I read the statement, I found favor with him until he suggested that there were persons from within.
So I said, look at you. So thank you. So we take a quick break, and when we return, I think we can tie in perfectly the question I asked: why are party hooligans nurtured to terrorize opponents turning against their masters? Will these parties disown and disband these dangerous groups, as the national NCCE is asking for? But guess what? If you have watched the documentary, you will see that what Kweku Bako just read to us was played up and in full in the documentary.
Interesting.
And the one who did the documentary actually informs me that the documentary actually started in 2016. We'll be right back.